All right, looks like we're recording. So I'll get started. My name's James Pepper. I'm the chair of the Cannabis Control Board in Vermont. Today is Tuesday, April 8th, 1:03 p.m., and I call this special meeting to order. All right, this is really a continuation of where we left off after our last rules hearing. I think we ended on the end of Rule 2. My hope before we go into public comment, of course, is to finish rules 3 and 4 in the kind of similar manner that we did 1 and 2, and then go back to 1 and 2 and kind of hear from Gabe how he's made changes to the more substantive aspects of those rules, if that's all right with everyone.
Sounds good.
Yep. Okay, then why don't we just do our public comment period. If you join via the link and would like to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hand, and then we'll move to the folks that join by phone. If you just raise your hand, feel free to make a comment.
Hi, James. It's Dave Silderman.
Hey.
So I want to make the comment that I couldn't make because of technical issues at the last meeting, which was to piggyback on the comment made by the previous commenter about the public comment process. And I think that commenter raised a very, very good point. And it brought to mind the way my town's select board handles public comments that I'd like to share with you, which is that they start the meeting with public comments limited to items not on the agenda. And then for each agenda item, after the board's discussion and before the board takes any action on it, they invite public comment on that item and that item only. Now that does create more public comment, which, depending on your perspective, is either good or bad. But hopefully, as public servants, your perspective would make that seem good. And that's what I wanted to share at the last meeting. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Anyone else for public comment? And if you join by a phone, you can unmute your phone by hitting *6. All right, I will close the public comment window. I mean, just as in response, we moved it forward because we traditionally had it at the end. And that gave people zero opportunity to weigh in on things that they saw on the agenda, including proposed votes. But I'm happy to move it around any which way, but I feel like we can kind of maybe get some proposals together, thoughts about it. I mean, it seems to me like you can say that the public comment is limited to that topic, but are you really going to be able to limit people to that topic?
No. That does happen. I mean, when I was on the select board, it operated the same way.
Yeah.
I guess for a select board, the degree of difference in the types of issues that they're hearing throughout a meeting might be different. So you could be hearing a zoning issue, then you could be hearing something else entirely, like a budget issue. All of our issues are related to one industry, but I don't have any. I'm not opposed to that at all. Actually, it might be easier for us to organize our thoughts around public comment.
Yeah. All right. Well, that certainly is on the table for debate. I had a feeling that this meeting was going to span 2 meetings, so I wasn't as concerned about missing the second public comment window for folks. Who knows? This meeting may go long and span a 3rd meeting around the rules. So I think there's ample opportunity in this process for public comment, but we can certainly think about restructuring it.
And we received 400 pages of written public comment, 200, 300, something like that. So there, in this particular case, there's plenty of opportunity.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay. All right. Well, Gabe, are you ready to start with Rule 3? Last time you were projecting in.
Yes, I can put Rule 3 up, and then once we've done 3 and 4, which I assure you are shorter, we can circle back to the changes made based on your decisions at the previous meeting. So sorry, let me get so. Okay. All right. So Rule 3, as you know, is the medical rule, and the kind of meta effort in this round of rulemaking is to begin integrating the medical system with the adult use system. We have a statutory instruction from the General Assembly to try to make those parallel systems as consistent as we reasonably can. The first major change that you made was to enter a definition of bona fide healthcare professional-patient relationship that matches the statutory changes concerning the patient-provider relationship. Almost everybody in the industry knows what these are, so I won't go on at length about them unless anybody has any concerns.
In the definitions section, I was once again thinking that we should add that definition of medical cannabis product.
I added one to either 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And I could add a corresponding, let me see if we use that term.
You do in 3.1.4, but you just define it in kind of that one instance.
Yeah, I guess as long as it's defined in the one place where it's used, unless you want to move it, we can move it in the
I
definition.
just feel like it should be consistent throughout these rules. I mean, I just, they overlap now with medical use endorsement.
Yep.
Okay. So it'd be adding it there, and then it would be kind of deleting some stuff from where you use it in 3.1.4, because you know, like,
Okay, that makes sense. And I can, when we get back to the already drafted one, we can make sure it matches what you're thinking.
okay. Yep. Okay. I think I may have seen a typo in 3.2.3B. I think there's an extra that I am a healthcare medical professional in good standing in the state of blank. Oh no, I get. No, it's right. Yep.
Yeah, it's the weird
Yeah.
ellipses used to kind of
that
make
sorry.
a blank.
There is a colon in D though. That's not that this is, probably don't need to talk about these.
No, it's as good
There's
a
a
time.
period and then a colon in D, it looks like.
Boy, that's hard to read.
I'm using the version that Gabe sent today.
Yeah. I finally am in the right version.
Okay.
And too many roles open on my
Yes.
browser.
Which D were we in?
3.2.3D.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were in 3.2.2. So 3.2.2 D. At the end, there's both a period and a semicolon.
Oh, you're good.
Not really, actually. It's just right there.
In the clean copy, it was just a period instead of a semicolon. So I've got that. All right. Thank you.
All right.
I'd be there forever. We didn't stop it then. All right. All right. I'll switch back to markup so we can see the changes. Sorry about that. It's just a pain to read the punctuation in that.
It is. Track changes stinks for punctuation.
My eyesight's getting worse, I think. Okay, the healthcare professional verification form changes reflect statutory changes, and there's nothing much to talk about there unless you see anything that draws your attention. We just changed truthful application to an application that credibly demonstrates eligibility, in the sense that you could make a factual finding that an application does not. It would be subject to appellate rights. I don't think that is likely to happen. And then technical change to A, so that this 3.2.5A, so the section can't be read as preventing discipline of misused or fraudulently obtained cars. 326, I think, is superseded by statutory change, is no longer necessary. Same technical change for 335A, just so it can't be read as preventing you taking appropriate action in the event of fraud or bad conduct. 343, we get into some of the exemptions necessary to reconcile the two rules, since the sort of stuff dispensaries aren't burdened with that other adult use establishments are. So there's the patient privacy and confidentiality provisions. That's kind of the reverse. That's something they have to have that an adult use without the endorsement doesn't. Enhanced employee training. Again, slightly enhanced educational material.
When we're referring, sorry
Oh, no.
to interrupt, when we're referring to enhanced employee training, that's the training that the board is working on providing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we got a lot of comments on 3.3.3, and I'm just trying to look at my note on what I said about that in my document.
If I recall, a lot of those were suggesting to remove
Just
that.
remove that section altogether.
Could we do that, given that these could be folks that are in vulnerable populations? And because the state statute requires us to do.
We can't get rid of it
background checking, right?
altogether. I don't think. I mean, the state requires us, and they just updated this. They got rid of the fingerprint background check for
Mhm.
caregivers, but they said we need to do a VCIC background check and child protection registry and like the exploitation, like vulnerable adult exploitation registry. So they wouldn't ask us to do those checks if we weren't going to do anything with the information. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine as is. Like, we're not gonna. I don't feel like this needs to change. Really.
I understand why people want to remove it, but I
Right.
don't think that we can.
Right.
Yeah, I think there are some changes to one, a little bit more flexibility. And I think you might consider that the considerable expansion of medical product access through retail could raise the stakes or the risks of bad conduct by somebody who's assigned a caregiver a credential who's using it to just evade taxes or something. So it might not be the worst thing to hold on to that connection to 1.11.
What about the next section down, 3.3.6? Is that just kind of an appendage of an old rule that we still need?
Yeah, that doesn't look good necessary to me. Nobody's still on their DPS card.
Right.
I think we can strike the whole thing.
Okay. Yep. I just had a note in 3.4.2 gave this more of a technical, just to make sure those cross references to section 1.4 and 1.9 still hold true after you've renumbered things in roll one.
Okay, I'll just make it rather than making everybody wait through it all.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we can for stuff like that. I can actually just probably touch base with you later just to make sure. I had a note here about whether we have the ability to deny an application for a medical dispensary based upon needs of the market. And can we shut this off like we can other
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an open question whether you have to accept the new dispensary license right now. It's not particularly clear.
The only reason I bring this up, not because I don't want more access to medical products, just if we start to notice that, there's a flood of new patients for some reason, and we start having a density problem with dispensaries.
Yeah, I think I need to do a little research before giving a committal answer. I recall kind of looking at it as an open question whether somebody could apply for a new dispensary license. And that's something to be to be sorted out.
Yeah.
Or whether, should you lockstep it with retail, if you're trying to just kind of
Right.
But I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you right now. That's completely
Okay.
confident.
Right. Sorry, you were on a roll, and then I brought you back 3 sections because of.
So I'm trying to blow past major errors.
I think that you left off at 3.4.3 or.
Yeah, I think that's where we are. So this is sort of the 3.4.3 is is sort of the list of points of distinction between a dispensary and an adult use establishment. And the dispensaries are few in number and generally operating quite well, I think. So mostly about educational requirements, use of inventory tracking, etc., employee education. Some vestigial stuff is stricken because it had more to do with the transition than anything else.
Right.
344 makes a stab at just reconciling the card system with the Order 1. We have added registered dispensary electing to deliver to registered patients 21 years of age or older and caregivers, or to transfer to another dispensary testing laboratory.
Is that a departure from what is happening now?
You've added the 20. You've added that 21 or older, so I assume that means that you would not want delivery directly to a juvenile
Right.
or under 21 patient.
Do we know there's very little delivery happening now.
That's right.
Do we know if anyone is delivering to someone who is under 21?
I don't know the answer to that.
It's a small number of patients, right?
I think it's under 20. Yeah.
So you get your section on visitors just has a minor addition to account for the possibility somebody may be accompanied by an interpreter and won't give them too hard a time getting in.
Good.
And then 3.7 are the efforts to kind of, implement the protective features of the adult use system, including testing, product registration. The IT team asked that the M be a prefix and not a suffix. I didn't know that mattered, but they said, please do that. So we changed that from the original proposal. The packaging and labeling are one of the more substantial rules and ways to distinguish these products. They have to be in plain packaging, and they may be exempted from the packaging requirements, for example, to have an arthritis-friendly cap, or things that would be easier for patients to access. And the most notable characteristic is that all of the packaging would be black and white and kind of unadorned. And so it'd be easy to tell from a distance what is a medical product, which again is defined as a product that is available in the medical system lawfully, but not in the adult use system. And there are no medical samples.
So we got a lot of comments about removing the plastic ban for medical only products.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
If I understand the rationale, especially if it needs to be in plain black packaging. And, you know, putting some cost on the medical patients resonates too. So I'm fine with that. I don't know if we need to make it clear in here that that's for medical only products versus just medical products. I defer to you, Gabe, on making sure that distinction is known.
Yeah. Up to you whether you wanted, you could continue the waiver system for medical, which we're kind of trying to get away from in the rest of the rule. You could continue the existing plastic waiver system and just instruct the committee, basically, you just have a much more flexible standard and then just rely on the language in 373.
That sounds good. I'm comfortable with doing that for products that would only be sold in medical.
Right.
The medical market. I think it gets a little messy if you're trying to sell flour that's also sold on either side of the,
And there was confusion about that distinction in a lot of the comments. So like when we're talking about medical only, we're talking about things that would qualify as medical products only, meaning they might go above the caps or the
transdermal patches or suppositories or
not something that is
could be sold on both markets.
Right.
It just creates too much messiness between the two.
Yep.
So a good case for putting the definition in after all. So we would it's a good idea. We'd define medical products as we had previously discussed. That would solve that problem, I think.
I had a comment on 3.7.1 testing. So medical products for sale at a dispensary or retail cannabis establishment with a medical use endorsement must have been tested in accordance with Board Rule 2 and related guidance by a third-party cannabis establishment with a testing laboratory license. I can foresee a world where we're going to subsidize testing of medical products. So could we add the state lab in there as well?
Yeah. Good use of our.
I don't know what capacity we're going to have there, but it seems to me like
give us the flexibility to do so.
Yeah. All right, that one.
Yes. We're just wondering if we have to license our own lab. I mean, would it shock you?
Exercise bureaucracy.
Yeah, I know. Deposit money into this fund, and then the pig comes back and okay. .7.5. There was some confusion in the comments whether this is a prohibition of sampling to dispensary employees of medical products or samples to medical patients.
Do we allow sampling?
Yep.
Now?
Not on the adult use side.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know about the medical side. Our hands were tied there, so I didn't really dig into all of it.
I mean, it seems like if we're going to talk about sampling to medical patients, there should be a whole section of rule about how we do that, how it's labeled and what happens with it. Not opposed. I just think it should be very clear how it happens.
Yeah, I think yes. And it's probably not great to spring something like that new, especially if it's not happening now, which I don't think it probably
I'm fine
is.
with just leaving this as is.
Right.
I think that I can imagine, people that are very concerned about the high concentration products not loving that coming in so late in the process. So, I'm not aware of a lot of demand for it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then let's leave it as is. And I think the way I read this is sampling is prohibited, whether it's for a patient or an employee.
Yep. And intra-supply chain too, right? Manufacturer to retailer to,
All right. in 3.8,
Mm,
I was wondering, so Maine, kind of opened up their criteria for qualifying someone to be a patient, and they are seeing active cases of like card shops, like doctors that are issuing more cards than they legitimately have time to have actually, visited with those patients. And I certainly don't want to call into question a patient's card, but I'm wondering if there is a licensing action, if a healthcare professional's license was revoked, whether we should take a second look at the cards that patient signed.
That professional signed.
Yeah, sorry, that healthcare professional signed. Whether we care or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's because of the tax implications and because this has happened. There was one certifier who certified a number of our registrants cited in New Hampshire. And called really into question whether or not that provider had examined people as he should have. And of course, you can go online and order up a card from California. Or not a card, a diagnosis. So I think it would make sense to have a, deregistration for cause, maybe as well as a provision where if there's a, reasonable suspicion that a verification may have been, fraudulent or unreliable, you could allow a patient, 90 days to get a new one from somebody trustworthy. Or that you could require that a patient who has presented suspicious material get a verification from an in-state provider.
Yeah, I mean, this whole medical use endorsement makes a lot of people very nervous, including the governor who almost vetoed this bill because of this. I feel like we need to be able to, not expect that people are going to abuse the system, but be ready for it if we see signs of abuse.
Is there something that happens in prescription medications that we could, even though this is not prescribed, that we could model after?
What keeps the prescription medication system in line is sort of the professional licensure of the prescribers and pretty strict rules about who may prescribe, and then the corresponding professional licensure of the pharmacists, and then some rules that protect the independence of a pharmacist to cross-check a prescriber without being retaliated against. We don't really have all the same tools here, but we could try to copy some of them. You could impose a duty on a dispensary employee not to, accept a, clearly suspicious card. You could allow for some investigative capacity. I think politically it is very difficult, though, to say to somebody that we don't believe you're sick. It's not a good look. So it can be a challenge, but some kind of neutral, low-cost ways, if you have suspicion, to send patient or a tranche of patients to be re-verified or to ask that they supply some credible medical documentation. Because inevitably we'll have that. We already did have it once. I don't think that there's a real suspicion those people aren't actually ill, but the provider.
Right. And that's the concern, is the provider.
Yeah. And you could have a kind of debarment list of sources that are not accepted. There are some 4 or 5 very obvious verification mills that are making no effort to, on the other end of the country, making no effort to verify the diagnosis. And you could just list them and say that, these, for cause, we're not going to accept anything from these suspicious entities. That might do it.
Do we do that in a guidance document or some other document so that it's updatable?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you put it in rule, it'd be so hard to reincorporate under a different name. we can't adopt them that fast.
It's like an act of Congress to change things. So
Right.
what is the way that we can evaluate those things quickly?
You could run it sort of, the Office of the Inspector General has like an excluded provider list of suspect providers that can't charge Medicare and Medicaid. You could run a little micro version of that where you have kind of an excluded provider list of people who, appear to have been engaged in at least not really doing the thing we needed them to verify. We should probably have some. I don't know that they have a protected property interest in elaborate due process about what happens if they don't agree with being paid.
So we don't have to come up with a specific criteria, or do we?
Let me do a little research. I mean, I feel like there should be a safety valve, but I really doubt that interest implicates constitutional rights. But I'll do a little looking. But I think I take the main point is we should maybe get ourselves a couple off ramps in case things go sideways and put it probably in this rule.
I mean, couldn't you just in the patient registration section say that the healthcare provider has to be, their license has to be in good standing? So that, or is that not?
Then what happens if that license is not in good standing after the person is verified? That's part of the problem, right?
Yeah. But then in this section, we say that we can take a look back at anyone who's been approved by a healthcare professional that has fallen out of good standing or his license has been penalized.
Yeah.
And I feel like you should probably specify that somebody who is the principal of a cannabis establishment that has been suspended or revoked may not obtain any card in the Rule 3 system.
Yeah.
Say may not obtain any card?
Yeah, would just be excluded from the medical registration system. This is if you were the principal of a cannabis establishment who was suspended or revoked.
And you got cancer, then you couldn't have a medical card?
There are always
Is that
waivers,
I mean, I'm
but
just
I
like,
think it's so
that seems
inherently
overly-
suspicious if such a person were to pop back up in that. But you're not wrong.
Why, thank you.
You could waive
But it
it
just
in the
seems like
event of extraordinary cruelty, but
it just seems like that seems like overly harsh if it, if somebody's terminally ill, to deny them access to something because they were excluded for a whole other reason.
Yeah.
Not related.
and come to think of it, the process is already there in the tie into 1.11. Like the weird you can now look at administrative background of making those decisions anyway.
Yeah.
So there's no need to do that. So I
Okay.
withdraw my
Okay.
suggestion.
All right.
All right. This is just a technical update to reflect a statutory change, and we are at the end of Rule 3.
Okay. I didn't have anything else on Rule 3.
Good to go.
No, I didn't.
And Rule 4 is really fast because I don't think it's much. In the coming procedural rule, I think we will have some more substantial processes to lay out for circumstance-specific proceedings. A tax revocation hearing, recall that's contested, that kind of thing. So for that reason, we didn't get deep into that sort of thing here, even when in some cases there is a need or an intention to eventually get there. Unless I've made a mistake, I did add a new category 1 for conduct of a character likely to deceive, defraud, or harm the public.
Yep.
Well, there was at least 2 comments, maybe more, about moving 4.5.2 M to a category 1 violation. which is the use of a pesticide, an unauthorized pesticide.
Mhm. I kind of personally, there are two, in terms of what we've seen in discipline, consider, there are kind of two flavors of it. There's the intentional use, and then at least as often we've seen people negligently use.
Right.
Often that was when a product was reformulated and it was
Right.
new and
Yeah.
improved, and the improvement is it's illegal now,
Right.
but it has the same brand name. So I'm kind of two minds about it, but
Yeah. I mean, we get into the situation where someone has to use an unauthorized pesticide twice in order for us to be able to revoke essentially.
And let's see, I'm sorry, what number is this?
It's 4.5.2 M. So it's currently a category 2 violation to use unauthorized pesticides, soil amendment, fertilizers, or other crop production. So
Would it make sense to make a distinction between intent and negligence here? And Gabe, I don't know how challenging it might be from your perspective to distinguish between those two on first blush, not necessarily the repeated violation kind of process, but how hard is that?
Yeah, you could write knowing use into one and then negligent use into two.
That might relieve some of the concerns that we found in Rule 2 with remediating pesticides and creating some type of secondary value of those products.
okay. Yeah. Okay.
But again, I'd look to you, Gabe, because from what you've seen that's happened, is that distinction easy to make and prove from the violations you've.
It's always easier to prove the less demanding.
Sure.
but that's fair. I think, in the most egregious cases we've seen, there was a pretty good circumstantial evidence. And of course, your standard is preponderance of the evidence. So if you have circumstantial evidence that makes it more likely than not somebody knew, you would be able to deal with it under Rule 1. So are you guys on board with that, splitting it up into in knowing as a 1 and negligent as a 2?
Yep.
Okay.
I am too.
That was the only comment that I had.
Yeah.
I'm a little sure.
Okay, I think that's it. And then, in case anybody is curious, this language is borrowed from the law of professional regulation, and I think Medical Practice Board has something similar. Just sort of a catch-all for a kind of egregious bad conduct.
Yeah.
Okay. So whenever you're ready, we can circle back to the changes made since your last meeting.
Yeah. Why don't we do that? Unless anyone want to take a break?
Not yet.
All right.
Let's keep rumbling.
Powering through. Gabe, can you just kind of take the lead on this one? Just walk us through the ones you want to highlight for us.
Sure. In the table of changes, I threw highlight on those that about half of all the changes. I really think we ought to just at least make sure you notice, and about the other unshaded part are mostly technical amendments or things where the instruction from you last time was very obvious.
Okay.
In a few cases, I had conflicting notes, so I don't want to, if you don't see what you thought you would see, it's not that I thought better of it or wanted to substitute my judgment. It's probably that I didn't know how to reconcile the conflicting notes. I think the first thing we've agreed, define medical product in 113. Some improvements could be made to definition of governing documents that I mostly made in Rule 2 rather than Rule 1. The one I want you to stop and look at is 134. This is the tier increase rule.
Mhm.
Switch on markup so you can see what was done. Actually, it might be easier to read it this way because I think the markup's going to make it.
Yeah, the markup somewhat, so I'm looking at.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be better or worse. Let me see what it looks like. Oh, choose it first. So you can see here what was done with 134 is really pretty substantially reworked. And I'm going to switch back unless you want me to stay with this to show you what we kind of did or what I did. And there are a lot of questions in here to resolve.
Yep.
One of them was when least census.
Right.
You know, at one point, I think we talked about making it only applicable when a licensing window is open, in which case it would be unnecessary.
No. Yeah.
And then there was the question of where in the calendar should it be permitted.
Right.
There's this kind of balance between, you know, preserve your flexibility and also have a system that the licensing division can administer. It occurs to me that you could take advantage of the uncommonly long 90-day run up, you know, in the last quarter of your license, your new application is open. So you could have a rule that would, this kind of favors, you know, regularity over flexibility and a very limited time in the first 15 days of that 90-day gap, the first 15 days of the last quarter of your license. You would announce your intent to apply in a higher tier and submit the application ASAP. Because it would take some work. That would create a narrow window, you know, and then it would be processed as a ordinary kind of license renewal, and the point of renewal would be when you tiered up. That does, though, defeat, I think, what some people wanted in terms of flexibility and saying, just why make people wait for some magic date? Up to you. You could say at any time. We had talked about limiting this to tier 1 and tier 2, the rationale being those low tiers were kind of designed by everybody to ensure a low barrier entry point. And if people succeed, we don't want them to be trapped.
The way this is written right now, in the first 15 days of, so in terms of thinking about like the magic date versus flexibility,
Yeah.
the one immediate benefit in my mind of having a date is being able to understand where we're at in terms of how much is cultivated and
Right.
what the flow through the market is. Can we deny this the way this is written, or if somebody meets these conditions, do we have to allow them to move up?
Right now it's written as a shall grant, but the conditions are pretty subjective. So it's shall grant the application if the licensee presents persuasive evidence, that would be honoring evidence of, you know, making optimal use of the
Outdoor portion needs
outdoor.
to be.
It won't go away. I said 100 times to get
Copying from somewhere.
that. Okay, sorry about that.
Like I could see the issue being if suddenly we had a number of people in tier 1 or tier 2 that wanted to move up, and that could result in further oversaturation in the market. That could be a problem, right?
So this one, that's the little 3, is I kind of tucked in there. I don't know that general market analysis is really in our wheelhouse, but you could look for something like somebody had a product take off, you know, or made a product for which there was unusual demand rather than just, you know, more flour. It might be too subjective for your comfort level. And then again, as we talked about last meeting, if you were looking ahead 2 years and you're not imagining ever granting one of these, just don't write the rule.
Yeah, I think we have no idea.
We have no idea. I think what I would like to do is and I'm just thinking out loud here, get rid of the like time frame by which they need to apply for this, but say that the board can vote to open or close an acceptance period for tier increases. And if we approve it, you can reapply at the next tier up at your next renewal.
We talked about this last time, right? And then the problem becomes a timing issue. So if there are people who would
Right.
legitimately like to move up and we only open it for 30 days
Right.
and they don't happen to come to their renewal, right, in
Right.
that period of time, then they're out. It's
Yeah.
not really, it even further limits a free market.
Well, we can notice the window in advance.
Do we wind up with a situation where in practice, ones can get, we just say, we're going to open the window, ones can get twos can get threes, and don't have ones are still locked out? You know what I mean? Like we're just kind of favoring
Oh, right.
incumbents
No,
in a
yeah.
way that disadvantages people that aren't already in the system.
I think that was a question I had, but that put us in legal.
Well, that's why I want this open. I want this flexibility within the next 2 years, which is if we do see a lot of people dropping off,
Mhm.
and we don't necessarily want to open ones to new participants, but we want to, allow the existing ones to scale up, the ones that are successful to scale up to meet that kind of demand that's been dropped, or that supply that's been dropped. This would allow us to do that.
Mhm.
So that's just a fundamental question. If we do see a lot of license relinquishments on the cultivation side in the next year,
Mhm.
do we want to backfill that with new applicants, or do we want to backfill it with allowing the incumbents to tier up?
It's a tricky question to answer, but I would think we'd want to afford opportunities to folks that are looking to move up.
Yeah.
I honestly think it would be a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
Because the intent that we got from the legislature is that there was no end to that, bring as much
Right.
from the illicit market into the
Right.
regulated market as possible.
Except they did consider a license moratorium.
But they didn't do it.
They didn't do it. Yeah.
But it wasn't because they thought there was a silver line.
Like an accusation without a conviction, right? And that was only on retail. This is about cultivation.
Last year was cultivation.
Oh, still, they didn't do it.
They didn't do
right?
it though. Yeah, that still holds. I mean, one thing that I don't want to do is, in the scenario that I said, you get this authorization at your next renewal, you can use it, and we got to keep track of all these things. And if someone's been authorized, I guess it wouldn't be that hard because
Can we just turn the shall into a may, and that
Well,
gives
that's
us a
what I
little bit
was
more
thinking.
discretion? I kind of like the concept of the first 15 days of a license. However, we get a lot of late renewals, right? Are people looking and paying attention? Is that our problem?
Well, the first 15th day of a license renewal means, okay, so we get this thing 15 days, and your license is going to expire in 3 months. We get this request. We don't know how long it's going to take for us to grant them. We probably want to look at a block of them together. Probably don't want to just do it one-off. And let's just say it takes us 15 days to approve it. Now you're down to 2 months before your existing license expires. And in order to actually do this, you're not necessarily going to be using your same facility. You may need to get a whole new certificate of occupancy.
I guess it depends.
You also have to have sold through final sale of what you have. I mean,
It's a pretty high bar.
What if you have a trigger that allows this to happen only if the state's net canopy has declined from the last time your license was issued? Does that make any sense?
fallen below or whatever.
I'm fine with that, but I don't necessarily, unless it's truly discretionary on our part to grant these things, if that shall is an A, because I still may want to deny it. If we think that the kind of if the market demand has shifted towards intoxicating hemp products or something else, that we may not need all the demand from the prior year. So trying to
Yeah, the canopy, I feel like it's going to be a moving target as everything evolves.
yeah.
To your point.
I just feel like it should be that the board can vote to open this application window. And we maybe open it for like 30 days, see how many people request this thing. So it's completely untethered to your existing license.
Mhm.
And we could like vote saying, I'm just going to use hypothetical months. In September at the board meeting, we'll be like, we're opening this from November 1 to December 1 and give folks notice. You know, that way it's not triggered by the board meeting for the next 30 days, but then they technically have.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd
couple
have
months
to
to
open
figure
it
it out.
for a whole year to let everyone who might be positioned to do this, or even maybe some of the people who are best positioned to do this, who might not have a renewal until July,
That's
right?
true.
Since Melissa's not here to scream, which she never does, the foot races are very difficult on licensing.
Yes,
You know, if we open and close a door, inevitably they wind up in, you know, trying to police who was on time and who was first, and like.
But this like is a little bit different than getting in a complete application.
Mhm.
This is a request, and it's based upon essentially objective criteria. Did you use 75% of your canopy, and did you sell through 75% of your products? I know it doesn't say that right here, but it's essentially, if we had more objective criteria, then it's not like, is this lease actually a lease? Does this lease actually convey a right to occupy? These kind of stickier questions.
well, that's why why not shall to may in that word?
Okay, so
The
do we
board
call this a
may, right.
petition that can happen around the calendar? Or did you guys like the?
I'd like us voting to open this.
Okay.
Would be my preference, just so we can actually close it on a set date too. And then allow people that are granted this request to either apply anew at their discretion or wait till the next renewal period to apply anew.
I like the 15 days of your license renewal. I think the people who are positioned to do this are the ones who are probably going to be paying attention and be prepared to do it and be thinking about it for the several months beforehand, right? Because like you were saying, it's not just about applying, it's being ready to apply for this too, right? But then just changing shall to may, so that we have some flexibility, like if the market is oversaturated, that we're not approving these increases.
Yeah.
The thing
At least on the May.
The thing that I don't like about the 15 days prior to renewal period is those are scattered throughout the year for everyone.
Right.
So if we did want to look at a block and it's tied to a specific date, like if we wanted to look at 10 of these, if we wanted to approve like 20 of these requests at once, we're really limiting who can apply based upon kind of just like the luck of what month we're looking at it. I just
Either way we are, right? Whether we open it for a certain period of time or do it this way. Both ways limit who gets in, right? Even if they're well positioned to move.
Well, maybe we take it out altogether. What's the consequences of us taking it out? The legislature told us to do this, to develop rules around this. We don't do it this go round.
We may not need to take it out. We just might need to accept that there's no perfect way to do it, which is basically what we're kind of dancing around.
I mean, in my mind, the best of the worst options is the board is allowed to vote to open the petition process. And if we accept your petition at your next normal renewal, whenever that is,
You move into that tier?
you can apply at that higher tier. So we can really limit, like, yeah, I mean, I feel like that just allows us not to have to accept these things throughout the year. And like, we may early on approve a lot of them, from the people that are within 15 days of their renewal and then just decide we're not going to do it again, leaving everyone else out.
Sorry, I'm trying to ask some questions.
Do we need to change this, these standards down here? If we do that, because particularly the part that says that they have to be sold through final sale.
Well, you're looking at the past 12 months, the prior licensing period.
Okay.
Or maybe we should just change it to past 12 months. So someone has to be in this business for at least 12 months, and we just look at the last 12 months from the point you
Mhm.
request this. 'Cause, yeah, the prior licensing period may be just a couple days,
Right.
you know, yeah. Okay. I think I like this approach.
Sure, actually just turned on, so it's
I think the only question is, based upon what you have here, Gabe, is someone has this request accepted. They are 9 months away from their next renewal. Do we want to give them an opportunity to renew at that next highest tier right away? Or should we just say it's at your next renewal that you can apply at the next highest tier?
I know the business office hates prorating and rebating.
Yeah, so you
I
just
think
keep it
raises
simple.
Fees questions. there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so just keep it simple. The effect of being accepted on this by the board is at your next renewal. You can apply at the next time. You can apply at the next highest tier.
I'm getting the sense that licensing would just prefer it to be moving up and starting new. If you get it, even if you're 9 months away. Then
You're
in there is where
applying
you
a
start.
like matter as an initial applicant?
Yep.
Okay. Which is what we would do for a tier change now, right?
If I'm understanding
Okay.
this on the fly questions that I'm asking.
What I like about that is we don't have all these dangling like authorizations hanging out. Like we've requested, we've accepted 20 people and now we have to keep track of, not that it's that hard to keep track of, some number of people, but because whenever we see a tier increase, we can just trace it back to, did we approve it? But the question is, do we want to make people that have been accepted wait for an unknown period of time? So I guess to me, the effect is you can apply anew.
Okay.
At the at the next tier up.
I still think we should change the shall to a may.
Yeah, I think so too.
Which shall was that?
I think
You already
did.
got it.
Yeah, you did. Sorry.
Okay.
I gotta change turn off markup on my version. There we go.
I think, Gabe, we don't have to watch you do this now. You don't have to, unless you want to do it now.
I just want to make sure I don't goof it up here.
More Gabe's working on that. Any concern around allowing twos to become threes? I know we talked about this at the last one. Should this really about ones becoming twos?
I don't have any concerns as long as we continue to hold that ability to grant yes or no as
Right.
like a final look at the market.
Correct.
Can you just reiterate where we landed, just to make it clear?
Yeah, yeah. So the board will vote to open an acceptance period for these. And we can have that limited by however we want to limit it. 30 days, 60 days, for the next 60 days, we'll accept.
We can notice it from
requests.
tomorrow or
Yep.
in a month, we'll start this so everybody has the opportunity to think hard and long. Can you meet the requirements?
Yeah.
At the end of that acceptance window, we'll have some number of requests to tier up. And we'll evaluate each one individually for these 3 criteria. And we will either accept or deny them based upon those. Once the petitioner has that decision in their hands that we have accepted them, they can renew. I mean, they can apply for that license right away.
Right. Okay.
New fees. New
Yeah,
timing.
it's
You're on a
new schedule.
new schedule.
And no refund.
Assuming that you've already gotten the approval from us, I don't think
However we handle that now,
Yeah.
I would
Okay.
say, like
if you've gotten to this point, you've already been granted the approval that you can move up by us. So I don't think that specific
Okay.
refund problem should be a concern. Other refund questions, I'll leave it up to how things are handled now.
And can we say that this authorization expires after a certain amount of time? This, like, if we accept one, if that's not an indefinite, like,
You need to act on it in 120 days or something like that.
or maybe just before your existing license expires.
Yeah, you have to do it for your next license or not. Then you have to apply again
Okay, right.
another time.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
I like figuring all this stuff out in public setting,
I bet this is a thrill a minute to the folks at home.
Sure, there's some folks that love it.
Sure, there's a lot of people screaming at their laptops right now. Forgetting this
Very
thing. Yeah. Why?
I don't know if this C is necessary.
Yeah, I was just about to ask. I don't think it's necessary anymore.
All right. 1 through 4 and 1 through 5 are the worst rules. Like the used to thinking about it ratio is real bad.
I know.
I'm happy with where we landed for 1.3.5.
I think you've come to a reasonable rule. It just wasn't fun.
Before we leave
Yeah.
1.3.4, we still have these terms optimal use and substantial majority. Made optimal use of the cultivation capacity and sold through final sale to others, substantial majority. The question there is, should we just get specific as to what should we say 70%,
75.
75%?
I mean,
For
this should,
optimal use.
Have used 75% your allotted or licensed canopy.
As long as that's not,
Final sale of a substantial. I mean,
I think I don't remember if I'm trying to recall after the doozy of the last Wednesday where and why we took certain numbers out, but I think we were trying to draw on distinctions between you're a smaller, not necessarily a small, but a smaller cultivator that's attempting to make optimal use and through trying to figure out what works for you versus you hold one of these higher tiered licenses and you intentionally have not tried to make,
Yeah.
fulfill your entire canopy.
So we
Not
want-
saying that where we went last Wednesday makes sense this
Yeah.
Tuesday. I'm
Right.
just
Right.
trying to,
Well, if we're gonna pick a number, we have to make sure we don't create a conflict, which is, I think this is what you're saying, between 1.3.4, whatever it is, AI or whatever, and then 1.3.5.
Right.
Yeah.
So if somebody's operating at 75% of their cultivation capacity, but they have a tier 3 and that 75% puts them below a tier 2, I'm not doing the math necessarily in my head, but we don't want to create a conflict between those two
No,
rules,
that's
right?
that was the nexus I was trying to figure out when we
That's what I
first
thought.
proposed these.
Well, then why don't we leave it there? And Gabe, I think if we ever vote to open this,
Guidance company.
we can maybe vote on what we consider to be optimal use, and maybe it's different between a 1 and a 2.
Won't
like
we
a T.
ultimately, won't we ultimately set that through kind of precedent over time?
Well, I think it could be honestly market determinant. It could be we need more 1s to become 2s, so we make that threshold lower, or we want more 2s to become 3s, or we don't want more 2s to become 3s, so we set a different threshold.
So do you want to change this to a specified percentage?
No, I think I talked myself into just leaving it flexible, so when we do vote to open this, we can decide what we think optimal use should be for that acceptance period.
Mhm. Okay. All right, then never mind that these don't align, and we'll go to 1, 3, 5.
Okay. 1, 3, 5.
So you guys preferred maximum capacity of the next smallest tier? And wanted to substitute licensing period for year. And then I tucked the word final in to clarify that this would be a final order of the board subject to appeal.
That looks fine to me.
Yeah.
I don't want to change any of that. I mean, the only oddity there is someone may be applying to renew, as we've all noted. Was it 90 days before? And so we're not going to be looking at full year's worth of sales potentially. So we may be making a relegation decision on 9 months instead of 12 months.
I think I have a process question that do folks actually start applying 90 days or they get notice
That's when
90
they can
days?
begin to.
Okay,
I think they get noticed at 120.
Yeah.
To
Okay.
start at 90.
I knew that there was a point that there was a notice and a point that there was an actual renewal.
Yeah, so it's like, I think that it opens for them at 90. They really only have 60 days to do it because it's due 30.
Okay,
So,
So in 1.3.4, it used to say prior licensing period. So I had just asked for consistency there. Should we look at past 12 months in both now?
okay.
So 1.3.5, just instead of prior licensing period.
Because then you're saying you
And the
could be
preceding-
looking at 3 months or something
Yeah.
small, depending on.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. 1.4, you had wanted a specific number of days, we went with 20. 1.4.4B is stricken because it was redundant with the operating plans and the governing documents. One we ought to stop and talk about is 171. This was sort of one of the big picture ones where, a couple of events had led you to be concerned that your hands are a little bit tied relative to disciplinary history. So we're specifying that the endorsement may be denied for bad standing, poor compliance history, et cetera. What is going on? So let me change to markup so you can see what was done there. Okay, so here you go. although it's not doing you any favors because it doesn't show you the the previous version. But so this is new, and I want to make sure you agree with it. A 6-month requirement that somebody applying for medical use endorsement has to show at least 6 months of continuous compliant operation in good standing, a compliance history consistent with the heightened responsibility of serving medical patients and caregivers, and scrupulous record keeping and tax compliance. Then a provision that this is sort of the independent discipline provision, if granted, the endorsement can be subject to compliance actions under Rule 4 as kind of a separate object. C, the endorsement has to, the applicant for the endorsement will include in its governing documents minimum governing documents that include all of these procedures, and you guys have listed these out. I think privacy procedures, confidentiality of information, separation of products, procedures, auditability procedures, and you'd have a pretty broad, pretty broad discretion to specify what the minimum documentary requirements would be. And they would all go in the folder of governing documents that somebody agrees to adhere to. Here in 5, there was discussion of a procedure for the applicant to have kind of curbside service to patients. I was a little bit concerned that you should make this available only when the premises itself have private parking. Otherwise, you have these handoffs occurring on the property of another person or on public property. And then I think there was some concern by you guys and other commenters that it could be read as compelling somebody to offer curbside who didn't want to. So we changed that to, wishes to provide, clarified that this obviously would go to patients only, and that there would be procedures to ensure access to products by disabled minor patients without entering the premises, which shall be integrated into an approved security plan. So the idea there was make it discretionary. It's also to take that curbside piece out of the rule lower down about low contact transactions, which is now just drive-through stuff. So this would take care of curbside for everybody, make sure it, is discretionary, and that it would occur only for people that had parking that they owned.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
And just to go back to the top of this section, a retailer could not apply for both adult use and the medical use endorsement at their start. They have to be operating for at least 6 months.
As written, yeah, and I want to make sure you guys are good with that because I'm okay.
I'm okay with it. I just want to, I swear where necessary, I like to make it clear. And that is clear. I just want to say it out loud.
Implicitly, we would then prorate the first one because there's an annual fee. So let me check with licensing and make sure that doesn't make their lives complicated. They might hate it. But there's some appeal. You were concerned, I think, that that people can operate competently for a period of time reporting their sales, keeping their books before they get the kind of higher consequence.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. So with the caveat that I better talk with the licensing folks about it. That sound okay?
Yeah.
Just in 5, curbside service to patients or registered caregivers, patients and caregivers.
Happy to do it. Is there a reason the caregiver can't go inside? They're not sick. That's why they're the caregiver.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Good point. Yep. That's fine with me. Okay.
Okay.
And then I did think that in the limited sales transaction, I drafted some regulations around curbside about like the spot being monitored, like 20, like the only person that can be is an employee. So, I mean, do we want to cross-reference that here, curbside? Like, I guess you don't have to cross-reference it. It's fine.
I guess because it's got to be integrated in the security plan, I think the compliance has a pretty broad hand to say, hey, that's not safe.
Okay.
Before you
broad-handed.
go on, can you go back to 1.4.9? So
Can I-
don't forget to bring it up again.
Can I pause?
Yes.
Do you mind if you guys just?
We can take a break
No,
if
I
you
can
like.
use a stretch.
Yeah,
We can
be right back.
Okay. Did you want to cover something else?
Well, we're removing 1.4.9 and it ties to 7 VOCA 903.
Mm-hmm.
So the 903 requirements to prioritize licensing or license applications will still exist
Mhm.
even if this goes away.
Yes.
That's it. I just wanted to say that.
Yes.
Just- we should say why. I just wanted to make sure we said out loud why we are doing this.
That is accurate, and a
Yeah.
couple of sections of the rule talk about prioritization
Mhm.
still. So there will still be prioritization going on. I think the thought that led to the elimination of that section was that we're really doing more harm than good to people of limited business experience or who are new by piling on this voluminous paperwork associated with, they're already trying to start a business
Yep.
and just keep track of this, keep track of that, file this, file that. And it ultimately is very difficult to enforce. So I think it's kind of part of the campaign to simplify the process.
Yeah,
to
fair
improve
enough.
access.
And then operationally, how will we get to those questions in the application process when we're prioritizing? Like one of them is, whether or not someone's going to create a ladder or
Mhm.
Livable wage.
paying livable wage. Yeah.
The sensible place to put them, I think, is in that orientation that's going to replace pre-qualification. I think the licensing staff would have that opportunity first to make sure somebody's aware of the social equity programs and the ways they can qualify for them before they apply, because it'd be a shame if they didn't know. So in that compulsory orientation for people that are interested in it and won't know, licensing could give them kind of a module on that for people that already are in business and don't need to hear it. We don't need to put it through it. But I think that might be a way to, to deliver on the intent of the General Assembly in creating the prioritization
Well, and
requirement.
that orientation isn't just for social equity applicants, right? Because some of those 903, like if a
Mhm.
standard applicant has these things, they also get prioritized. That's part of that.
Yes. So
Okay.
that orientation applies to everybody. It's really a screening device for people who might qualify and not know it.
Okay.
So that way, if you're a woman-owned business, you would learn at that point, there's an economic empowerment category. I can, declare into it.
I'm all in favor of making the application process simpler. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure we still do the things that we are required to do. That's it.
And
Yes.
the way I've always read 903 is that's the priority system we need if there's a backlog. Like, how do you organize the backlog of licenses? How do you decide who to issue first? And so if we don't have a backlog, then this doesn't really come into play. And it's for new licenses, right?
We have no idea though,
Yeah, I know.
if we will ever, we could experience that. I
Yeah,
don't
we
know.
could. Yeah.
We could. I think
We
it was
assume that we
adapted from out west. Well, it's kind of like it's like legislators imagining like a bureaucrat with a stack of papers on his desk where he could just reach in and give special
Yeah.
priority to one, but it's almost never the rate limit.
No.
The bureaucrat's rarely the rate limiting step. So it's the fire inspector or something.
Yep.
But, okay, I think we're being faithful to that statute. I will double check before we.
That's fine. Since it's out there, we should probably say why we're changing it.
Yeah.
Yes, and it really is to benefit exactly the same people that the positive impact criteria are meant to
Yes.
benefit by making the whole system more accessible.
Can we stop at 1.7.2? Because to me, I feel like this is where we're going to have to deal with the changes of location, the retail changes of location. I like what you've done here. This is like, to me, helping to kind of spread out the retail locations if someone does request a change. I think it should be function of the population and the retail density. So we're looking at if someone's asking to relocate to, like, if someone from Burlington is asking to relocate to Morrisville,
Mhm.
the population is less, but the density is a problem. Like per capita, it's a problem.
Mhm.
Is that not solved by the previous clause, only in transitioning from an area of higher concentration to one of lower concentration? I read that as kind of like a per capita type of.
But we haven't defined what concentration means. Right.
Well, I guess
As a function of population, couldn't you just say and existing retail establishments?
an existing,
Retail establishments?
yes, I kind of thought of that as implied in
Oh,
there.
okay. All right. If it's implied, I just want to make sure what we're looking at is clear.
We could say retail establishment. Oh,
Oh,
no.
Control C is it's right.
Oh, I just hit something.
Do we want to say retail density or?
Yeah, you changed it, Julie.
I did.
Hit Control Z.
I'm on a Mac. It's a command. Okay, never mind.
All right.
I don't think it's there. Oh, wait, no.
That's what I did. I accepted Gabe's change. That's what
Okay,
I
now
did.
I found it.
Oh, is that why I'm marking up my markup?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. You
No,
should
I see it now.
password protect these.
Yeah, I don't need to be on editing mode. My permission should be taken away.
Okay.
Does it not get at it if you just say just in existing retail establishments at the very end of that phrase as a function of population in existing retail establishments?
We can say that. I kind of, when I read first, and this is me, not the general
Right.
person who's reading this, when I read only if transitioning from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration, I read that as let's use your more, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but from Burlington and population to Morrisville and population. If we look at it from a concentration perspective, I took that as like a per capita kind of concentration problem. You know what I mean? Not just that Morrisville has, gosh, I don't know how many Morrisville has, 4, and Burlington has 13. So you can automatically go to Morrisville, but it's comparing the population of Morrisville to how many retail stores they have versus the population of Burlington and how many retail stores they have. And then you can do it if it's,
Well, then,
That's how I read it.
if we maybe we don't want to change it then, Gabe. If
I don't know, is that what you meant,
by
Gabe?
changing it, if by changing it, we're making it less clear. That's not what I want. Everyone was on the same page.
that's how I took it. That doesn't mean that other people questioning it are.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like you can do it either as a function of, sorry, let me just retype this out.
Getting lost in per capita.
Yeah.
And is
Yeah.
that what we want, that you could, if the math is the way you're talking about it, someone could then move from Burlington to Morrisville, even if it seems like Morrisville has too many for their,
That's the way I read it. And then again, your
but this is,
business, you know, do you want to go to a crowded space? I don't know. I think we still need to figure out though what happens if somebody opts in before we can get our retail siting stuff done.
and this is not the last step for this rule, right? There's some legislative changes that might require us to look at this again.
Yes,
Okay.
there are. I don't know the timeline for that. You know, like to me, there's a big difference between creating retail siting rules for changes of location of the existing ones while we're not issuing more versus retail siting rules while we're also issuing more retail locations. You know, from conversations I had with the retailers, I think that they actually didn't hate our rule if it only applied to the existing licensees moving around the state. They didn't like that it could theoretically add 500 new retail locations in the
Right.
state. So I'm wondering if this is the section where we also just say like either bring in like, you know, caps based upon municipalities
Mhm.
that we had, or as Krav suggested, look at catchment areas
Mhm.
instead of municipalities.
Mhm.
The problem that I have with catchment areas is because of the absurdity of Burlington and South Burlington and Williston.
Catchment area for Burlington expands.
If I was thinking, if you're looking at like a town plus all the abutting towns as the catchment area, then South Burlington comes online and no one's allowed to move there. Williston, because it's abuts those two towns.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can just gerrymander to get any answer.
Right.
Could you move within an catchment area? Sorry, I don't know why I can't say that word. Could you move within it?
Yes, you could.
Yeah, they're allowing, I know licensing is allowing people
One of the
to,
commenters wanted us to use census tracts or something.
Oh, I know.
Just like,
That can be really, I mean, we have some very small, oddly shaped census tracts.
Right. I don't like the census tracts. But I do kind of like what Julie's saying is that you can move within a catchment area or to one that is below that cap, whatever that cap is.
yeah, I mean, kind of similar. I mean, the rule as drafted right now would say you can move within the current municipality. If you're changing municipalities, it's gotta be to a place that's less dense. But then it's less dense, within a 50-mile radius?
I know, exactly. I know. It's just like consumers don't care about the municipal borders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
They care about driving distance.
We must have some data, like the state marketing must have some data about how far people are willing to drive for things. Like when somebody decides, like Walmart, for example, not that this is a great or a large organization decides to move to a new area, they usually look at that kind of data, like where's the population, how far are they willing to drive to, or how far can they go to make a purchase? Those are the types of things they look at. We must have that data.
Look, you got some stuff from DLL. I remember.
That was about how they decide where they're gonna put
Mhm.
their spirits, the liquor stores, but they intentionally don't want those to compete with each other.
Right.
Right? So it's not the same. We want them to be allowed to compete with each other.
how does it AGA help change the definition of local food and how you could use the word local? And I'm trying to recall how we could use some of what I learned. For instance, the Champlain Valley includes areas of New York. So you could call something made in the Champlain Valley, even if it was made in New York, but not call it local, meaning made in Vermont. Trying to figure out how I can use those types of ways that we refer to more, topographical areas of the state here, like the Mad River Valley or the Upper Valley or the Champlain Valley. I'm losing my train of thought.
I guess, I mean, the pitch for moving past this one is that these requests are not going to be numerous. And when they come, they're not likely to be close. And that if I took two locations on the map for about 75-90% of them, you could eyeball it from where you sit that, B is less dense than A.
Sure.
I mean, like I'm fine with this being where we land now, knowing that we are gonna have to continue this conversation.
Yeah.
And this is the specific section where the retail siding is going to go in. So we're going to open this up again once we put it.
Yeah, this is just sort of a placeholder to deal with what happens if people, and I mean, you could consider, is it a move? The trouble is, you could consider, is it a move of necessity? The building burned down, got evicted, or is it a, calculated business choice? I guess for moves of necessity, there's always a regulatory waiver. Somebody's building burned down, they can't find a place to rent in their town.
So then what do we do if South Burlington opts in March and we have 30 people all apply for a change of location on the exact same day?
At the exact same time.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous theoretical game we're dancing around.
That seems highly unlikely. I mean, it could, I
It may
guess,
not be 30, but it could be 14. And then we're back in the problem that we are right now, where everyone is yelling at us, how could you allow this to happen?
There's always the 6 month cooling off period kind of thing where, you know, you say for the first 6 months that a municipality has opted in, board will not accept applications while in order to afford an opportunity for local zoning authorities to, you know, take appropriate action. That's not going to solve your prioritization problem, and it's going to make really angry people who just have to go there.
I think we can potentially solve the prioritization problem, in my view, by just having set times where we are with the application.
Mm.
You know, we will take 7 days to write our incomplete letter, 14 days to write our incomplete letter, and we're not going to send it out as soon as it's done. We're going to send it out for 14 days for everyone. You know, from the time you submit your application, we will submit an incomplete letter 14 days later, or issue the license if it's a perfect application, and then let the licensees race amongst themselves. As long as we're not creating delays that would unfairly disadvantage people.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes arbitrary fast, and licensing really, it's very difficult for them to arbitrate or umpire those contests because there's so many different things. Like, how do you tell if somebody's being sincere that he can't get the fire marshal out? How do you know?
There's too much reliance on things outside of their control, even if it's not us.
Yes, it's not arbitrary because we're being arbitrary. It's arbitrary because life is arbitrary when building a retail spot. And, you know, so we feel like we're having this fair competition when in fact it's like, you might as well have a lottery. You might as well just,
Okay, well,
but I mean, it doesn't make sense to me to have a nobody move rule, right? Because if somebody wants to relieve existing pressure and respond to market demand, it goes somewhere where they're needed. Why would you want to stop them?
well then what if we? Okay, so let's just play this out then. Let's just say that we have 10 people from Burlington apply to South Burlington if South Burlington were to reopen. Once we just license people as normal, issue the licenses. Once we get this to this equilibrium point where the accepting town is, you know, as concentrated as the giving town, then we stop issuing new ones. I guess that doesn't work if you're moving from this.
And there's the equity problem of kind of giving these coveted spots to incumbents only.
Well, I think that's going to be the case until we reopen retail licensing. Well, we could just fall back on local approval. I mean,
It has. Sure. I mean, yeah, that's a bigger question, but I think the fears that localities would be just reflexively opposed to anything cannabis haven't really come true. And the measures put in place to protect them, if they were, actually made this problem. So,
well, that is to me adding a local approval element to this as a just like thinking that, you know, what we're really worried about is a new big town opting in and everyone racing to that. Adding local approval gives them an opportunity to create zoning if they want it. So, you know, I think the broader question about retail siting really applies when we're bringing in new retailers. I think that's the real concern. So maybe just adding local approval, knowing that we're going to need to revisit this.
can I jump you down to the limited? It's a weird jump, but you would wanted a local approval clause in the drive-through.
Right.
If we want to put one in here, we might as well settle on language and use it consistently in both places. So if you jump to to express written authorization from the local Cannabis Control Commission if one has been created, or the local legislative body of the municipality.
Yeah.
That
Sounds fine for a year or two.
And I guess, the question is, well, what standard are they applying? And the answer is, well, the one that they wrote into their ordinances, right?
That's fine with me.
I know, from talking to, I think, Councilor Shannon from Burlington was in the rules meeting and was kind of expressing the irritation we hear a lot from LCCs about, like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
This would maybe start to give them some important work to do.
Right.
I'd love to see more local control. Absolutely.
Same here. Okay, yeah, I'm happy with that. And then we don't have to get into catchment areas or any like regional populations or anything until we start doing our primary retail setting.
But I just get lost in this.
There's 1.7.2.
So he's like right under your nose.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the request has been approved by maybe. You said Roxbury doesn't have local municipal government?
No, they do. They just don't so.
Okay.
Sure, I want you out there. Petition that.
Yeah.
Is there any other retail in Roxbury? Like,
There's
have
a
they
general
done
store.
any? Yeah, okay.
All right, Gabe.
So
Are
they
we
would
ready
know
to
what
move?
do.
I would
Ready to leave that one alone for now?
Yes, it's a mountain that it's a false peak that we've climbed. How about that?
All right, 172. That was
That one.
okay. That was a big one, so I'm glad that one's behind us. 111.1. This is the very broad effort to make your rules a little bit more flexible about troubling background events. When we last talked, we had kind of said, well, we're going to take 111.1 and move it into presumptions. And when I went to do it, I realized that doesn't really work because there's such a diversity, unlike criminal convictions where you guys attached to that in the first round. You kind of know what they mean, they're well defined. There's such a diversity of issues here that you're almost obligated, rather than relying on the nature of the assumption, to just give notice in a hearing. Just tell the person what the problem is and offer them a hearing.
Right.
So for that reason, I didn't merge 111.1 and 111.3 in the way we talked about. You've substantially kept your presumptive criteria. I wanted to call your attention to the trafficking. Well, before I blast right by it, 111.1 is modified in significant ways so that you're not going to weigh status offenses like possession offenses against somebody without some other wrong act but you will soon or would have broader discretion to address other troubling actions like repeated actions against professional licenses, civil, conviction of a crime of violence, exploitation, fraud, or conviction of a disqualifying offense. The earlier qualifiers kind of are a little broader that we'd found that those disqualifying offenses weren't perfect. Revocation of a professional license, repeated failure to satisfy civil judgments, pay. I think we had talked about changing creditors to suppliers in your last meeting. I don't know if you wanted to do that or leave it at creditors.
If a tier one cultivator has not been paid by a manufacturer, would that count as a creditor?
Yes.
Okay, I think creditor is fine. What do we gain by adding suppliers?
You narrow it. I mean, you
Okay.
gain that you're out of the. We do in H321. There would be a provision that says consumer credit shall not be a criteria for a license verification. I don't see this as contradicting that, but it's common close. I mean, we wouldn't use a consumer credit rating. You would really look at are these basically small cultivators that you stiff. So I think you're okay there, but be aware of that section.
So it's people they're dealing with within the industry essentially, not if
Or
they don't make their
outside.
car payment, right?
Oh, well, I guess creditors, yeah.
Right, but that's the distinction that you make in a different section of the rule, right?
Yeah, that's where we talk about, or no, I think it was supposed to be in this one, but
You had written it at one point.
yeah,
That's
that's
in
what
H321. Maybe that's where you wrote it.
No, somewhere else in this we substituted something for credit, or I don't know.
Oh. I see. It was in it. It's in the statute.
It's in the bill, right?
Yeah, it's in the
Yeah,
bill
sorry.
for sure.
Yeah.
The consumer credit shall
Yeah.
not be a factor thing. No, I'm just saying, like in an earlier edit, I thought we fixed this creditors thing to say something else, but I think it's okay unless it bothers you guys.
It doesn't bother me. I don't think we would ever use that as a basis to deny.
No, as long as it's clear to, if we all win the lottery and are not here, that it's
Right.
clear to the next group,
Yeah.
like.
Yes, the creditors that I think are
Okay,
going to
yeah.
get your interest are people within the industry who are taken advantage of. So persistent disregard for administrative orders, no trespass orders, court orders, or the rights and safety of others to include violent, threatening, or harassing behavior. That one I think really gets more directly at, some people by their documented behavior are not really suited for participation in the marketplace. So then you've got a notice and hearing provision, and the bottom of that provision recites the same standard that you're applying with presumptive disqualifications. So these sections are not really the basic presumption system for conviction-based things is not changed.
Mm-hmm.
You'd continue to get memos about that rather than hearings, and we go ahead with the current process. 1.12 would expressly condition, it has been your policy not to issue licenses to people with outstanding violations, but this would say that more directly, rather than just having it be the board's consistent policy. The rationale there is that anybody can be heard under Rule 4 in 20 days. So there's never a case where somebody can't get before you if they say, well, you're holding up my other license, I want to clear my name. They have an opportunity within weeks. Okay. So the sections D and E separate the two things. If you I'm going to change that to no markup because it's impossible to read. Okay. So C is not new. D and E are significantly revised. In that this is sort of a no reapplication in lieu of appeal kind of thing, or reincorporation in lieu of appeal if you're associated with a revoked or suspended establishment, and you can't be associated with a new establishment. And E makes that the appealability distinction that I was talking about. And what it would do is say that a grant or denial of a license is a final decision of the board and is appealable under 847. However, withholding issuance under sub D, because you've got an unresolved violation, is not an appealable final judgment. It's instruction to go get one in the underlying case. So we wouldn't want people to refuse to be heard on their violation. You understand what I think we can skip. I think that's it, unless you see things of interest to you. After 1.1, most of what's going on is pretty black and white, or technical. There's not a lot of 1.15.6, I think, got you some elbow room to, I think, a couple people raised, if we're changing these governing documents, shouldn't we be allowed to, and I think this is an artifact of when things were done in a big hurry, when everybody's getting rushed into the market. We have some security plans that aren't really much of a plan. So, and we've learned from experience that it really helps to have minimum content in those contingency and management plans if things go wrong. So there's a little bit of a change to 1.15.6 saying, of course, staff can ask you to tune up your governing documents as a condition of renewal. That makes sense. But that's really all in one, unless you're seeing anything there that concerns you.
Good.
The 1.18C would take out some of the exemptions for tier 1 cultivators because, in some cases they're unnecessary, or in the case of the shutdown plan, they're actually licensing centers that are higher risk, statistically to shut down abruptly than people that aren't exempted from that plan. So that's what you got.
We're gonna exempt 1.3.5 from tier 1 cultivators, which I think is, again, inherent.
That's the relegation.
Yeah, tier relegation.
Yes. Did I not do it in that rule? Oh, you're right. We said we better do that.
Yeah.
You're paying attention. Okay.
I mean, I don't think we would ever do it, but I mean, even if we didn't put it here, I don't think you're legal be allowed to do it.
Isn't that just revoking the license?
Yes.
Yes.
Isn't it?
You're in tier 0.
Yeah.
Right.
Put it in there. All right, I'm gonna close roll 1 then.
Ooh, okay.
Be right back.
Does anybody need a break?
Yeah, why don't we take a 5-minute break or 10-minute break?
I'm good with 5. I just need to
Yeah.
use the restroom.
All right, why don't we do it 5 minutes? Why don't we just come back at 3 o'clock?
Split the difference.
Patrick, do you mind doing that? Thanks. All right, Patrick, we're back. And just as a time check, this is special meeting of the Cannabis Control Board. Today is April 8th, 2025, and it's 3:04 p.m. And we are about to pick up our kind of final review of Rule 2. Hopefully fine. Gabe, if you want to kind of just drive us to the areas you think are of concern.
Sure. Here we define medical product in the way that we've been talking about. Well, if that definition is acceptable to you, we can export it to the other rules where it may be useful. I don't think it was used in Rule 1, but it would be exported to 3.
Yeah, it's fine.
This is just to true it up with the APA. So I think this was Dave's suggestion that we add to the records that are required to be kept contracts and agreements with third-party providers. I think.
Gabe, would you mind putting it back up on the screen? We can't see the. We can't see
Yeah,
the
something's
screen.
going on. For some reason, it's not being captured. Maybe just pull it out and plug it back in.
Okay, sorry.
That looks like it's got it.
All set now.
Can you
Thank
see-
you.
Okay, sorry about that. Couldn't tell it was a problem. So here at
Do you want to go
221.
back up quickly just for just to benefit?
Yeah, sorry if anybody was watching and couldn't tell what we were talking about. Here is your definition of medical product, defined as something that can be sold in the medical system and but not registered as an adult use product. Gets into, there'll be an M prefix on it. It'll be in black and white packaging.
If you ever want to change the black and white packaging, is it best not to put it in Rule? I mean, we're probably not going to change in the next 2 years.
If you're not going to do it in the next 2 years, I'd say leave it alone. You could always, every time I write a terrible rule.
No, it's all right. Just leave it. Leave it as is.
Right.
Do we want to call it medical only product instead of medical product to avoid any confusion that folks may have in distinguishing the products that are sold on both sides of the marketplace?
I mean, what that definition is trying to say is that the only is implied in there.
I know, I'm with you. I'm just,
But yeah, if you think it would be more clear to say medical -only as a description of the product, or I don't know, you need a hyphen, but
As you're doing the scan through,
mhm.
I mean, are you going to scan through?
Yeah, I mean, all the cross references we need to check, all the line numbering we need to check, you'll die of boredom.
yes, I don't know if it's necessary. I'm just wondering,
How about you have the flexibility to make that final call if you feel like,
Okay.
as you're reading how it's used in the actual context of the rules, that medical only would be a benefit.
Yeah, that's great. Sometimes when I've had boards give me approval, it's sort of been, with authority to correct scrivener's errors, and, formatting mistakes and to
Just clarity.
use consistent phrasing
Yeah.
that doesn't change the substantive rule.
Do you think along the same lines, although not the same question, is this what the tax department will use to determine what is taxable profit and what isn't?
No.
Okay. I just want to because part of the doing this was to explain the access, and I'm just
That-
wondering if this will be used in that way.
No, they use who the purchaser is.
Okay.
Not, we're trying to say what's prohibited on adult use.
Okay.
Purchaser rather than product.
Okay.
To that end, when we get to Rule 4, we should remember it may be worth making an express violation, straw purchasing.
Yes, that's a good one.
So
Yes, that is,
that's one of the
that's a
big
major
concerns.
concern. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm not sure we have a really clear, do not do. Okay, so now we're showing the business records, we had a good comment from Dave Silverman recommending that we expand out what's required to be kept about contracts with third parties. The rationale there is that under 901(d)(3)(a), you could kind of, those are a tool that could be used for kind of covert franchising. And I think that makes every bit of sense unless you.
No, yeah, and that should go into Rule 1 as well, I think.
The insurance, everybody's got to get insurance now. That's the.
And maintain it.
And maintain it. There have been quite a lot of relatively small but painful fines for people that dropped insurance between.
It's a no-no. So
that's one you can't do. And as more people get in the system, I think premiums hopefully will come down a little bit. So reference here to the manufactured food rule is then this was Julie's point at the prior meeting. Section 3 of that rule says it doesn't apply to cannabis, and we don't want to get caught in a loop. So good thing you noticed that. Excluding pets and animals has been in the original proposal for a long time. It didn't draw a lot of fire. Note that that doesn't apply to outdoor cultivators. You can have your dog in your outdoor cultivation. There has been some modification of this one concerning the inventory tracking system and who can access it. I think compliance had problems with people getting in there on behalf of others, et cetera, et cetera. I had taken a shot at restricting language, but I think the feedback was it was too restrictive and it was going to break people's ability to work with business partners they wanted in there. So I kind of took a shot at replacing the blanket prohibition with an accountability rule that it basically says, you're accountable for what somebody does, we let in does. So I'm not sure if that answers the feedback we received, but clearly the first one was thought to be too rigid by a lot of people. Okay. That's really just a stylistic change there. This is the, I think Tito Byrne recommended this one, said I've already got a transport manifest, don't break it. So we've added an option to just, instead of using our form, use a form that's approved as acceptable by us. This is 229, drew a lot of interest from a small number of people that were involved in the unlicensed brands. And there was a gentleman up in Burlington, I recall. Ski Shop, I think, was another. So we kind of split the difference. The original one would just said your packaging can't have any labels that don't correspond to a license, or any brands that don't correspond to a license. That was seen to be a problem. So the kind of more flexible version of it that you might think about is what I've got here, 229. Free brands that names that facilitate unlicensed activity tend to frustrate the one license rule. That would happen if a brand became so dominant that it effectively had market control over the people using it, or tend to deceive consumers as to the source of the cannabis products. At your prior meeting, we had talked about doing something like what is now in sub C. Again, they're about accountability and assumption of risk. And the establishments, I think, that were doing this had suggested in their comments, hey, we don't mind being on the hook for it if, for example, we associate with a brand that advertises to kids during the Super Bowl or something. So I don't know what you think of that language, but that's what attempts to respond to your recommendations to the last.
Yeah. Yep. That does it. We're not having a fight over the warning label this round, I think. We are, because Julie got the Department of Health to graciously agree that the IICPS symbol would make things consistent among the states and globally. So I should pause here to emphasize that the board, when it implements this rule, I think almost certainly will issue a categorical waiver and allowing a run out period to prevent waste. So we wouldn't want people to panic. They're going to have to throw hundreds or thousands of dollars of labels out. Just don't buy new ones that don't comply.
reporting theft or loss was a subject of discussion. The loss was concerning to people because they thought some people read it as requiring that they notify the police that they just have a waste to production or they spoliation or something. That's not what we meant. We meant somebody took it on purpose. So I think that answers your question or your preference there.
The theft in excess of $1,000, that part was there to state and local law enforcement? Was
It
it
said
there before?
loss initially.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
originally loss, and people said, "Hey, we lose
I
things
drop
to
this and it breaks. or
Yep,
goes down.
but the state and local law enforcement part was there before, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
but it was theft or loss. I think
Yeah.
was scaring people. And I think the challenge there came from compliance, getting calls from people who said, "Hey, somebody in the industry stole from me to the tune of
Mhm.
$3,000. Do you document it with the police?" Well, no, not actually. So the hope is to put an end to that. The adulteration we better pause on because there was a lot going on here. At your prior meeting, we had talked about separating first applying the principle that aspergillus remediated cannabis should only be bound for non-inhalable products. I can't remember whether I think there was some discussion of the processing into oil rendering it safe, but I couldn't remember where we landed on that. So what you've got here, I could just be quiet and let you read if you want. Sorry, I'm fixing this one as I find the problems in it.
So you can remediate aspergillus adulterated flour, but the pathway, you're shutting off pathways for that remediated flour. But it does not require a label. They're saying that it was remediated.
Right. So the way it would work, I guess, is the first label that's following it during production is an occupational safety label. I just added that sentence about, you don't have to label things once they're no longer something you can inhale. So for aspergillus, the reasoning is if you're already putting it into a chute where it's not a hazard because it's going to be orally ingested or in a topical only, then there's no hazard of which to inform the consumer. Then you would treat differently adulteration by a pesticide because there's a more substantial health question confronting the consumer, which is what did this do to the rest of the product? If it's a food grade pesticide, that experiment has sort of been run in every rhubarb pie and jam. If it's not, though, there is, I think you guys had talked at the last meeting, and forgive me if I got it wrong, this E3 would say the consumer facing label has to disclose that a source was remediated. That is for pesticides. COAs disclosed to the consumer have to include pre and post remediation results. And licensee can't lean on the labs to lose a COA.
Yeah, it's fine with me. I mean, what we're not accounting for on the aspergillus side seems to me like there are safe ways to remediate aspergillus into a distillate for a vape cart. But we're not allowing that here, which I think is fine. I think this is safe. This is safe. And, we're shutting off one pathway for aspergillus remediated flour.
You could say may never be sold as flour or a pre-rolled product, and then that would open the path to sell it, to process it into an oil, if that can be done safely.
We want to open up that pathway.
You feel pretty confident that
I've heard
is your-
that
what is your confidence level?
I've had I think 3 different conversations with the labs about this. Every time they've been pretty consistent with processing processes. And I last time I said usually do this because I'm not sure if every single processing process, like whether it's kind of heat and pressure versus propane or some kind of solvent extraction. Yeah. So maybe we just leave it as this. Maybe we just say it can only go to an edible.
I think, and I remember saying last week, most of the aspergillus issues are through no intentional fault of the person that's growing it. I mean, they might have some environmental issues that need to be cleaned up, but I think if again, health and safety is at the topmost priority, but if there are safe avenues to still find financial viability in your product, I think we should strongly consider allowing them.
Yeah, as long as we're not unknowingly putting a consumer at risk, right? So maybe it is that if you feel pretty confident in the oils, maybe there should just be a label that accompanies it.
I'm also wondering, I know we've approved this kind of pilot on aspergillus remediation. Whenever the results of that kind of are found, are we giving ourselves flexibility to utilize them?
Not in this, because aspergillus may never be sold as flour. That's about flour remediation.
So I don't know how we kind of timestamp placeholder. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Maybe
Not the sign.
The weasel way out is to say you can put a lot in those in the guidance pathways.
in guidance we can say it's okay.
And well, you could do this. I mean, you could, if you want to break this out, and I should have put these in subsections before. I apologize. So you say remediation for aspergillus may be attempted if performed in conformity with testing and remediation pathways set forth in board guidance. So if you don't want something to be available, just don't promulgate it. Is one way to kind of make sure that you're not pressed into doing it ahead of having any adequate science to be comfortable with it. Then in D, you could say, that is D. E says more simply, never in flour or infused pre-roll. And then it would open the oil avenue if it was part of a remediation pathway that you had approved.
Okay. All right.
So you can kind of open and shut it based upon your comfort level with,
How that
the
goes.
applicable science. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice work, Gabe. Very complicated.
It's good work staying awake.
I know. I'm losing it.
I feel like a
We can
bad
make
teacher or something. Although you guys are
No,
you're good pupils, but I feel like I'm losing the audience here.
I'm trying to think about all the big issues left.
Man. Okay. I staring at screens. Okay. I'm trying to remember 2221, I think drew some concern about who may register. I just want to make sure it's adequately dealt with here.
The bulk flower is the comments I remember the most. That's in here. Retailers being able to register bulk.
Yeah, this should say sale to the public.
Yeah, and I think we thought with the 2-year product registration stuff and some new expiration dates on flour, that problem might solve it itself.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
This may lead to an absurd situation though, right? Where a retailer allows a product registration to lapse unknowingly just because it's in their warehouse and they hadn't been tracking it closely. And what's the effect that they have to destroy that?
Doesn't make any sense. I think we need some rules about what happens when the blameless custodian, is holding unexpired but unregistered stuff that somebody else should have registered. Or the supplier goes out of business, isn't there to keep it up.
Is there any, I mean, could the retailer register the product in the same manner that the original person did?
I think that's what has been happening in some cases.
So that's not really a concern then. Retailer finds out, oh, geez, this thing expired last week. They need to submit it for testing and register it, right? It was registered once, it should be relatively straightforward.
Yeah. And this doesn't get too much into it really is silent on who may register, just sort of says only registered products can be sold to consumers. I don't even know if you need that provided, however, do you?
Does this clarify some practice that is that why that's there?
Well, when it
Some
said,
practice that we've been doing?
I think before you added that sold to the public, maybe you needed that. You essentially wanted products to be registered throughout the supply chain, except for bulk flour.
Oh, so you want to the public back out because
No. I think that's probably why it was there. When you add to the public, you can probably delete that bulk flour.
Right. Yeah, so I think the provided, however, is no longer an issue because it no longer restricts who can register a product. And that would basically be left to policy. Okay, is that one okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Okay, 2223, this is the old farm family rule. We've gone back and forth about this. At our last meeting, you had asked me to remove the requirement that the two spans be, I think we wanted no more than two. So we should say 2 non-abutting spans is permissible under the one license rule if the spans are separated by no more than 5 aerial miles and are demonstrated by an applicant. We had talked about shifting the burden to the applicant to provide this historical information with documents. 2 have been continuously under common ownership and used for farming as defined by the definition borrowed from the fire safety law. Okay. For at least 10 years preceding application. So by making it have to be continuous for a decade and immediately preceding the application, we should maybe say immediately, because all years preceded the application.
So does that continuously apply to the common ownership and the farming? Has been does the continuous?
Yes, it distributes to both.
Yes,
to continuously under common ownership and continuously used for farming. The idea there being if we've got a lot of capital and I swing in and find something that used to be a farm that was separated and put it back together and then try to run 2 cannabis establishments on one license, I couldn't do that.
Yeah. And what about the 10 years immediately preceding? Does that travel upstream to the common ownership?
I'm not sure I understand.
Does that person have to have owned that property for 10 years? Right?
Yes, that's the question.
Not as I understand it, common ownership by somebody, but not necessarily by the applicant. But if somebody were to purchase a property that was not being used for farming, was some other
Okay.
use,
And
and
just-
put it back together,
Yeah.
they couldn't then claim,
Yeah.
well, you got the idea.
I'm just thinking about these big family farms where like, you and your parents, own different parcels, then your parents die
Mhm,
and you inherit these parcels.
mhm.
Do you need to have owned the two non-abutting parcels for 10 years? Your parents died 3 years ago, but they've got you inherited a piece of land that has a greenhouse on this parcel. A mile down the road, you've got a kind of a shed on this parcel and you want to use both.
Mhm.
Would that be allowed under this? I mean, my question is about the 10-year ownership.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I guess the trouble is if family members who are not the same people, I've got one field, my brother's got the other, and
Right.
my parents have the other. Is it too restrictive?
Right.
I just feel like the 10 years for farming is important so that you're not just buying a parcel, and then throwing some ducks on it,
Mhm.
some geese, whatever, non-ducks, anything other than ducks. And then you're,
Some chickens.
yeah, some chickens. And then you're saying this is farming now. Now I can use that for that parcel. Or maybe we don't care. Honestly.
Well, it seems like it seems like the goal that we want is that people who are using have land that has been farming can be used for cultivation, right? So that
Yes,
it
that's the
continues to
goal.
be in some sort of agrarian
Yes.
state, right?
That's the goal.
And it doesn't matter to us as much how long a person has owned that piece of
Right.
land. Yeah.
That's right.
Mhm.
For me, that is true.
We'll just move the under common ownership part to the
Yeah, to the end of that
end
sentence.
of the sentence, and that way that the 10 years kind of just
Right.
more poignantly applies to farming.
That sounds good to me.
So if you live on a long road that has multiple pieces of farmland and you purchase them up, you could essentially make your space that you're cultivating bigger.
You could use two
Right.
non-abutting spans.
Yeah,
within that,
like if
yeah.
you were a mile down the road, somebody sold you a piece of land that had a greenhouse on it.
Right.
And you were already a licensee, you could then buy that and use it
Outdoor
if
cultivator.
it was already, yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
All right, I just want to
Yep.
make sure.
Yep.
Yes. I think conceptually, Dave, you get this sense that the common ownership doesn't have to have been for 10 years, but it had to have been in farming continuously for 10 years. Sense.
So you would be allowing somebody who bought multiple unaffiliated farms to piece them together.
If they're less than 5 miles apart and they're an outdoor cultivator. I mean, to me, this doesn't open things up to, it adds, theoretically, it adds some work for our compliance team having to travel from one location to a next in certain circumstances to do an inspection.
Okay, I think we're good.
But it's somewhat limited.
I think it's somewhat limited.
See how the HP battery's down to 19%.
Oh yeah, does anyone need this? I'm good now.
How are you?
Are you in the charger?
Okay. I got a plug right by my feet. Thank you. Sorry to steal your charger.
Okay. All right. Employee samples, yeah.
Oh yeah, that one. I was just kind of looking for some direction on what you want the caps to be.
The real question is, did we anticipate the 4 grams per strain per vendor and no more than 7 strains flour per vendor? So the 28 grams essentially.
Mhm.
Did we expect, and that's per month. So did we expect that to be for every employee in a cannabis establishment? Or did we expect that to be, that's the cannabis establishment's allotment per
Mhm.
month, and they can distribute it to their staff however they.
The latter probably makes some sense. I mean, as you grow and grow and grow, you're not involving every last employee in the purchasing decisions, right? You kind of have this core of people that.
I think the latter is the way we
Yeah.
should go.
Feels like the intent was for
I think-
purchasing,
Right.
not as a benefit.
Right.
I think we were also trying to initially balance, you're not just gonna wanna give away all of your product, you're gonna wanna see some return for it.
Right. But
How that's played out, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But-
All right. So that was meant to be, the receiver was meant to be, I feel like, a cannabis establishment, and then the distribution
buyer.
was to be their existing employees.
Yes, and
Right.
it was meant to make smart purchases,
Right.
not as a employee benefit like you would.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Does that make sense in the context of the competition sample rule?
I wonder if this whole section shouldn't be called employee samples. I guess it can be. It doesn't really matter. It's fine.
What's vendor mean? I'm just like,
I assume that that's meant to mean I would assume it'd be like a manufacturer to a retailer
Yeah, up and down the supply chain.
or a cultivator
Okay.
to a manufacturer. Although I see less reason for that, but
and we could just call them, business partner samples or something.
I think Massachusetts called them vendor samples, and that's where
Oh, that's
that kind of
where we-
word came from.
I think
Okay.
other industries use it like vendor samples,
Okay.
Yeah.
like,
I mean, we're anticipating this be cultivators or product manufacturers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two. Maybe a wholesaler.
Maybe.
Yeah.
could be a wholesaler.
To a retailer.
To a retailer or a manufacturer or a wholesaler.
Well-
So maybe vendor is the general catch-all that captures that.
Well, I mean, this is pretty straight. I mean, all of the A little i's or all of the whatever little i's take cultivator as their subject, except the competition samples, which we decided to expand to manufacturers because that is what you meant all along.
So should the competition samples just be a separate section? Should that be 2.3.9?
I'm scared of causing renumber.
Or not?
Oh, no,
That's
no.
fine.
No, we're right at the end of the 2.3, so we're not going to break too much.
Okay.
All right.
It seems like it's
Yeah.
their purposes are different.
Yes, I kind of agree.
Yeah, and maybe instead of vendor, we just say the cannabis establishment samples, and stop talking about specific licensees.
Mhm.
Separately, isn't there separately a place where it allows for retailers to provide samples or? Because isn't this in the retail section as well?
Yeah, it repeats. All right, if you agree, the important thing is that you agree that
Yeah.
it's per establishment or whatever, so I can clean this up generally. Um, All right, if you guys are good with that,
Yeah,
I think,
you have the direction from us.
yeah.
All right, perfect. Okay. And if by fixing that section, the next section becomes redundant,
Mhm.
feel free to.
Feel free.
And that might be nice because it feels redundant already. You can-
Yeah.
You're like, didn't we just talk about this up higher? There's not much going on here. This is the little more flexibility around fencing. That was popular with commenters. Trivial technical change. Technical.
I wanted something around visibility from a school as well, the school property.
Yes, let's talk about that one when we
Okay.
get to it.
Okay, I thought it was here.
I did too, 2.4 something.
Oh, did I go past it?
2.4.4. Is that it?
Visibility from a public road.
Oh, yes. I know, my question, is what, I don't remember a commenter asking for it. Did it? I don't know where it came from.
I don't remember it being in these specific comments, but I believe that it's come up in conversations with,
Quite a bit over the last couple months.
yeah.
It's, so is that too much? I mean, I'm not saying that you can't. A comment like an outdoor cultivator can build a barrier
Mhm.
between the school and again, your comment, narrowing that to school reasonably occupied by kids
Mhm.
and not like K through 12, not preschools,
Yeah.
daycares, or universities.
Yes. I guess there's the case of, you're in flat land or you got somebody sitting up on a mountain with a classroom overlooks a
Downhill.
very large, has a very nice view. Like the Harwood High School has a beautiful view of some things.
Could tie it to if they're within 500 feet of a school and visible.
That
They're like school.
I think that makes
drug-free
a-
school zone.
that makes a lot more sense.
So within 500 feet and visible, and we're just at 500 feet as you define it later in this
Mhm.
rule.
Mhm.
Is that all right?
Yeah, if we took
Okay
this,
with that.
basically take the buffer zone.
Yeah, and say if you're an outdoor cultivator and you fall within that buffer zone,
Okay. That
and
makes
it also cannot be. It just can't be visible from a part of the school reasonably occupied by kids.
I mean, we may run into instances where we have to make decisions, just like Gabe was talking about, like if it's 500 feet from a school and the school is up on a hill, that could be a problem. Like, is this, what I wonder about with this is, will this impact anyone who's already operating, somebody who's established?
I think it might.
I get
but
it for like new,
Yeah.
but what does it mean for people who are currently cultivating?
I mean, to me, the way around this is to try and make reasonable attempts at
Yeah.
obscuring.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
given the farmland conversation we just had
Yeah.
and how Vermont has developed its schools and its farmland, I have no problem with it. I just think we should anticipate some conflict.
Well, I just don't know if it's gonna hurt them to look at it. Let me see.
I mean, I'm okay with leaving this out. I am. I flagged it. It's come up. I've heard these conversations are ongoing.
Yeah, I think it might be, if it's come up, I think maybe if we just said make a reasonable efforts rule or something. I'm worried that like rigidity is gonna have us splitting hairs over
Yeah,
some of the
okay.
dumbest things in the world.
If we could start with a reasonable efforts, that would be good.
Yes.
And then it would give us
Yeah,
a
big
sense of what
progress.
these.
Yeah, that's great. This was
2.4.4.
yeah 2.4.4.
Okay.
And you could grandfather the existing establishments if we want to make sure that this is just prospective. We're not impacting existing. Here.
What do you think of this? 2,000 feet is made up and I have a very bad sense of distance.
I don't know how far 2,000 feet is.
It's over half a mile.
This one?
It's a lot,
Should go over half a mile.
Okay.
maybe 1,000.
Yeah, the next part of that sentence, as it's written, only refers back to the public road, of course.
Do we want to make it different than the drug-free schools?
I mean, I'd be fine with 500. Just to be consistent
Mhm.
with drug-free school law.
I broke the syntax of that sentence.
Yeah. Well, do you mind just making a note, or I mean, I'll make a note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to watch me try to work it
Well,
out.
I'll have to wordsmith it right here in
You
front
don't
of
have
us.
to do that.
Okay, easy enough. Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you.
A cup of coffee ago, I would have been able to solve that problem.
No worries.
Okay.
You added utensils and wares, 2.6.1.
Yeah, the energy reduction stuff is uncontroversial, I think. I do want to note for you that because it was simplified so much to basically just keep your utility bills, the rationale for exempting the tier ones later in this rule falls apart. And they're kind of risked. I mean, you might get some information from those bills if you can access them. So I struck that.
That's fine.
So unless you object, that probably makes sense. This is the home kitchen rule. Just want to make sure you don't want to put in an express grandfathering clause. It is always possible to have a waiver of some kind for people who have an extraordinary reason to need more time to transition.
Mhm.
There's the wares and utensils from Crave. The vape pen. Yeah, the last page. My only concern about this is that none exist that don't have plastic in them. So read literally, this would non-battery components that comply with 229B, which is the plastic prohibition. I'm not aware they exist in the world. Do you want to, is there some kind of, must the plastic be recyclable?
I think, I mean, it's my impression that we start saying recyclable, compostable, certified anything. It's all just fake. It's not real.
Right.
I think we have a process that we went through to deal with the EcoStar to verify that what they were saying about the component, non-battery components, was actually legitimate. And I think I'd be hesitant to create a blanket exemption as opposed to just dealing with it on a case-by-case basis.
I'd rather deal with it on a case-by-case basis because everyone from a consumer to a company conflates the word composting and recycling, and
Or
is it industrial
PCR.
composting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, are you actually tracking the post-consumer recycled
Yeah,
plastics?
I think I'd rather handle it on a case-by-case basis. I don't know how we kind of enumerate that in, but
What do you think of that?
yeah, perfect.
Okay.
All right. 2.6.4. This is about allowing hemp or hemp products into cannabis products. So certainly understand the desire for this. Very rare that this actually happens in other states. I know I should say that our consultants weighed in on this and they said, why would you ever do this? This should be a closed loop system, and this is a pretty major kind of backdoor that you're leaving open by allowing this. So it seems to me, one thing that they said Michigan does is they require certification, like a chain of custody showing that that hemp was grown and processed here in Vermont. I don't know how I don't think that we have that same capability here. We gave our program back to USDA, right? So we're not tracking that anywhere.
I mean, they must get some documentation that they're licensed to grow, or whatever it is, to grow through the USDA.
We would know that they were licensed
Right.
through USDA. I don't think we would necessarily know that the cannabis, the hemp that they're
I see.
providing.
Was that with which was grown here?
Right.
Right. I mean, I think the consultants are right about the closed loop. I would like to get to this at some point where we can have products that are one-to-one and, but I don't think our structures is there yet.
Yeah. So seems to me that we should remove this section.
Yep.
Okay.
So just strike and replace with nothing.
Strike and replace with nothing.
The inverting problems you're seeing in Colorado and New York or
Right.
Yeah.
situations like that.
All right. Next major thing. You wanted consensus on 2.6.6.
Oh,
that's the same.
Yeah, that's basically
So yeah, I think that probably if you kind of get clear that this is one licensee to another, then you'll probably don't need a different rule. Or cultivators versus manufacturers. Okay. Two point 8.2, this is locking trash cans.
I think we covered this.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't look like there was any question from Gabe on where we landed. The next
Yeah.
highlighted one is 2.8.11.
He's made it easy for us. Oh, it's coded.
And we could talk about it, of course, if you want.
No. I just,
It's the highlighted ones that we're.
yeah, no, I just want to make,
we can talk about NBL.
We can, just,
yeah, no.
the problem is if we talk about it, we think of
I know,
something new
I know.
for you to do, and so.
The more you look, the more errors you find.
All right, so let's see what you did for 2.8.11. This is limited contact, which again is what Michigan calls this, and then because it applies to both curbside and drive-through, we decided that we're going to kind of separate these out. You see, I thought I had rules in the original. I thought I drafted something specific to curbside, but maybe I didn't.
You did. It's probably, well, you can see, I may have just masticated it so much that you.
Okay.
Might get it proposed back in November still.
I should look at that. Yeah, because I think we do need something around curbside. Like that is, I know we're just limiting it to medical patients, but I think that there should be something clear about needs to be certain insurance requirements for this, that there needs to be. It's the curbside plan has to be approved. It has to be in your own parking spot. The parking spot can't obscure the cameras from that parking spot.
Most of that, there was that earlier language that started talking about curbside in 3, because it was only going to be for medical patients.
But it didn't address insurance. Would an insurance company need an addendum? Would they want to do an addendum?
I called that guy
Yeah.
and he said yes.
Okay.
He said that anytime they're changing how products are delivered. Like
Yeah.
you should notify your insurance broker. We write policies for this. It's
Okay.
easy to accommodate, but
So the section in 3, I wanted to, this was the original instruction from the board, I think, was break this into 2 sections.
Yeah.
And then because it was already in 3 and you had decided to make it for applicable only to medical patients,
okay.
I built that one out, maybe
Okay.
not enough. That was the section that talks about it has to be integrated in your security plan
Okay.
and specifically approved, et cetera. It doesn't say things like no cash or
Okay.
it doesn't say that out
Yeah.
loud. It doesn't say insurance, no cash and video. We could go back.
I'll add that stuff back in. Is everyone all right with that? Just me beefing up
The
the
curbside medical.
curbside
Yeah.
Sure.
to the same requirements that we had, that, it's gotta, I don't think gonna be anything that surprises us. I think we did it once already.
No, it's fine.
And since it's medical specific, 3 seems like a good home for it to
Yeah,
prevent
sure.
confusion.
Yeah, okay.
As long as that's the path you want to be on, that it's,
So the only thing that I wanted to add, and this is open for discussion for drive-through transactions, is that they can be, you can do drive-through and serve patients and non-patients alike, but you have to have a medical use endorsement in order to do drive-through. I think A, it'll be an incentive for people to get a medical use endorsement, and B, I think that because the medical use endorsement is going to have our compliance team take a specific security look that about this, it'll be at least in these early days, if we're taking the kind of cautious approach, it'll give us kind of an ability to just go look at this thing and not have 60 applications for drive-through overnight, which we might get anyway if we have that many medical use endorsements.
Yeah.
But at least have be one kind of limiting factor that I don't think. I mean, the idea here for me is originally was, all right, if you have to do this for patients, and you can do it safely, we're saying you can do it safely, why not just allow it for adult use customers as well? But what this would allow without requiring medical use endorsement is someone who's not serving patients to get one of these things, to have a drive-through. I think the rationale for including it at all, in my mind, was if you're going to, it's one way to accommodate patient confidentiality. Why limit it to just patients?
right, and why waste the investment in the hardware and staffing?
Okay.
So this would be just to run through the requirements. You've got a local approval,
Sure.
insurance, cash transactions prohibited, necessary, unnecessary.
Or not allowing curbside cash for medical patients.
Yeah, why wouldn't you allow cash for a drive-through?
Well, there may be a legal reason not to allow it based upon the way they rule. I mean, medical statutes are drafted, but maybe we just don't care.
Well, do the medical statutes not allow cash? I don't understand.
I just there may be a legal reason to require the transaction to occur before the
Oh,
person is right at the window.
I see. Okay.
I think that's why that was one.
But I don't really care, frankly, other than that.
And the other consideration is non-cash transactions are more auditable,
Yeah.
just by nature.
Okay. So let's.
But then are you going to have people trying to use payment apps and stuff like this?
I actually don't care. Maybe we just say no cash at the window, but but you can do the transaction at the window.
So transaction has to be defined as the money changes hands, not just that you place your order. I'm splitting hairs
Yeah.
totally, but I mean, like ordering and then pickup is not a transaction.
Well, it's
Ordering
not
and
that.
paying it.
Yeah. It's actually, it's not, the word isn't transaction, it's purchase.
Okay, well then there you
Yeah.
go. That is very specific.
I mean, I think we're splitting hairs there already, so maybe we just stop being crazy and just say we should allow it. we should allow I don't like the cash necessarily.
Have people found a way to have non-cash transactions at their registers?
Yeah, I mean,
Most
sometimes.
places I go there still.
Yeah,
still have
I've
to
seen
get
a lot
cash.
recently that
Have you?
Well, I don't frequent them very often, but I was in one this weekend that had a debit option. But it's gonna mean that sometimes you can use it and all of a sudden you can't use your drive-through until you find a new platform.
Well, as long as some folks have found a way around it, that's something. But if we write this whole rule and say cash transactions are prohibited and then no one can do anything
know,
about
yeah,
cash
yeah, yeah.
transactions, there's no
Maybe we
point.
just allow it.
It'd be fine to strike it.
Okay. Yeah, it's,
Well,
nobody demanded it, nobody.
It's raining a lot.
So, so then there, your window can't be a cutout framed by 2x4s or something. And video surveillance, integrated security plan, normal business hours, and then when 2 or more employees are on duty.
Yep.
And then obviously got to be an employee to sell it.
and then you have to hold a medical use endorsement.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's in the very top.
Okay.
Establishment with a medical use endorsement.
We have everyone in the car has to be 21 or older.
Yeah, that's in there.
Okay, looks good.
All right.
Getting close.
It's my
I
top
have
part.
a question about E. So that means they have to, age gate everybody in the car.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just different than the, like you can go in and not have to give your ID unless you look under 27, right?
35.
35.
35. We raise it to 35?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember because I am 35.
I
I
forgot.
mean, we could
Maybe it doesn't matter.
roll your
I mean,
windows
from a-
down, and if you look under 35, give me your ID.
From a prevention perspective, you would want everyone in the car ID, right? I'm just pointing out the difference.
We can loosen it later if we find that this is a regulation in search of a problem.
I think every other state that allows drive-through calls for this,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
The flip side is, not that I want to change it, but if you're
Just drop your kids off
If you're-
at the park.
Yeah,
you
and
know.
you're on your way home and you're trying, and it's cold and you don't want to get out of your car, and I can see how practically it's, it is what it is, but I think where we're at right now with seeing if this can take place, it makes sense to include.
Okay. 2.8.14.
This is the consignment rule. So it was suggested that we define consignment, which is done. That's when the ownership interest doesn't actually change until the sale occurs. And then, so at the time of this effectively says the same thing twice for emphasis. You got to transfer ownership for real.
I think it'll be helpful for folks to understand what the board means by what a consignment. So the redundancy, I think, is.
Yeah, I don't mind it so
Yeah.
much in this particular case because it caused so much confusion. So we say it twice for emphasis, and then you had settled at your last meeting on should there be a cap on receivable terms?
And we decided on 90 days.
That was your
I think we
consensus.
did it it was about this time in the day, and we were all like,
90 seems
if we could go to
reasonable.
60. I mean, I think the more we shrink it, the better it helps small cultivators. It's just where should we start it, knowing that there has never been this cap. It'll help find shelf life for smaller operators, the smaller that number is, in my opinion. But we can leave it at 90 and see how it goes.
Um,
Better than 6 months.
So 2.2.9. So I'm looking at D. And the thing that I have heard repeatedly is that the 10% variation.
No, you mean 2.9.2.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yes.
We're coming to the end.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Apologies. I know.
I was like, oh no, he's going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. That 10% in D is keeping an entire category of new products that are relatively new to the cannabis market generally, but are probably some of the best quality products off of the market because they consistently test just like a little bit above that variance level. I'm talking about live rosin. So this is created through a mechanical extraction process. So there's no risk of residual solvents in there, which to me is really important. The whole kind of process that they did for this mechanical extraction method was, a market demand for cleaner, more natural products that don't require things like ethanol or butane or propane. What's happening now is most of these products test just a slightly over that limit. And the producer then adds something back into it to dilute it. Could be terpenes, could be anything else. And then they retest it, and then it's just under that limit. It's, from my understanding, if that was raised to 20%, then we would allow for that category of products to come in, and we won't be in the situation where we don't know what people are putting in those products. We know that we've prohibited propylene glycol, and we've prohibited MCT and vitamin E acetate. We don't know what the next vitamin E acetate is going to be. We only know about those three because people were putting them into products and it was causing people to die or be hospitalized. We don't know what we're going to be always chasing that next diluent. If we just kind of, keep allowing those things to come into the market, I think raising that to 20% actually creates a healthier market overall.
So this section is about, I agree with your argument. My only question is, this section is about potency parameters. And so if we allow a variation of 20% more, I mean, it's already at 60%. Could you have a product then it's 80%?
No, I would allow it to go up to 72.
Okay.
But
Still have to be labeled.
and it would have to be labeled as 60. You can't market this as a high potency concentrate. However, you would have access to the COA that shows the actual testing result,
Right.
which it doesn't actually, it could be 18%.
Yeah.
Because it's really like 70% is like the kind of between 65 and 70 is the sweet spot for live rosins.
Okay.
So if we want to be kind of more surgical, we could do 18, but if we wanted to kind of just be consistent with our flower allowance, we could do 20.
I'm okay with 20, but should just considering the back end of your argument, should it be all cannabis products provided that allowance? Just because people are going to dilute no matter
Well, all of them
what the
would
source
be
of manufacturing is.
all of them would be except for that we'd be decreasing that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what we're hearing from the labs, as I understand it, is that for the live resins, those produced without a solvent, just through mechanical process, the natural landing point for many of them is just a hair above. And when people are required to go back and add dilutants and impurities in order to hit a number, there's kind of this perverse result where you wind up with a less healthy product over a relatively trivial difference. And so I think they're talking just live resins, right? Meaning
Right.
flash frozen product that's then mechanically extracted without
a solvent.
just
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess, so the question is, do you want to be that narrow? Because I think that's the narrow band that they're saying, this
Yes,
doesn't make
this
any
is-
public health sense or any
Right.
other sense.
Right. It really was not meant for solvent extraction. It was meant for this kind of mechanical hot press extraction.
It worries me anyway that you could think you're buying a product that's 60% and it's 72. That's a pretty big difference
Right.
for a lot of people. And there seem to be more inherent risks with high potency products than there are with lower potency products. I think that your argument about what people add in
Right.
is a good reason to change it, but the
thing that I don't want is for people to use this as a marketing technique.
right.
So I want that. That's why it's 60% within an acceptable range. If you want that range to be more narrow, then that's fine. I feel like anyone who's buying a 66% concentrate, which is allowed under 10%, is not going to notice an extra 1% on a concentrate. And also the alternative pathway for the live rosin that tests at 67% is to put it into a vape cart,
Right.
further distill it, make it more potent and stick it into a vape cart, add some more dilutants to it. So
I'm weighing which is the worst.
Yeah,
public
what is the
health impact,
worst? I know.
Right. So I guess it's to me, it would be the additives probably.
right. I know I like
I'm
that.
fine with changing it, yes.
And I do like that line you added. Live resin's free of additives. We're not saying put more additives into something. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. That's narrowly aiming at what. Yeah. I mean, it's not to try and allow. Yeah.
We're not sneakily trying to up the
Right.
percentage.
Right. It is really aimed at this thing, just this one product that is actually probably beneficial compared to its solvent-based alternatives. And it's just 1 or 2% over the allowable tolerance. Okay. That's all I got. Anything else? If you want to think about just out loud, have a discussion about next steps.
You had two other
He
I don't know if that was for today or another
could have
time.
raised his hand at the end of class.
This is your paper.
Julie.
This is your sheet. I'm just trying to be helpful.
This is no time for thoroughness.
We can talk about these two things another day.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought it up. I'm just kidding. Because I would like your permission to take care of those. I want to take care of one of them, and for people who can't see it, the two things on the list are tying up loose ends for trim teams, which may call for some minor content in Rule 1, mostly to clarify what they don't have to provide. We just need them to have insurance. We really don't need to subject them to the other application requirements. And then I don't think that the PR duration question is best resolved in rule. It's because I think we've been talking with some of the proponents of that legislative change about putting out guidance cooperatively really soon on that topic. And I think they were aiming to get some industry consensus so that everybody knows what to expect coming out of the session. So I don't think that, basically, I'd rather that be done in guidance. I think it makes more sense. In terms of next steps, it's up to you what you want to do going forward. You could authorize today me to make the changes that have been discussed today, and including to correct Scrivener's errors, to correct outline numbering, and otherwise to kind of improve the consistency and syntax of the text, as long as I don't change any substantive rule. We could come back for yet a third special meeting.
How about we do that if needed? How about you take some time with these to clean them up and kind of align everything with what we discussed over these last two meetings, and then send them around. And then if anyone wants to request a meeting, we'll just do it that way.
That sounds great for open meeting purposes. I can launch it to all three of you. Don't talk about it, but if you have any objections or concerns that we call for a meeting, tell me or the chair and
Yeah.
set up.
I do think that trim teams have to do cannabis banking though, right? That was your question, isn't it?
That is not 100% clear to me, and I want to talk with some of the banks
Okay.
and maybe DFR. I mean, they're providing a physical service. They're not ever transacting cannabis. I mean, they don't know that they're doing anything the electrician isn't doing. Well, except for the part where they
Except they're
participate in the
touching.
cultivation of the plant. Don't mess up my theory.
I looked at the FinCEN guidance this morning when you sent this.
Fine.
And I thought maybe based on that, they would
Yeah.
need to do cannabis banking.
You're probably
I might not be right, but it's okay if I'm not, but I did do my homework.
and it probably would be healthier to have more immediate audit access to some of these things. I think in other states where trim teams have been around, there's been a question of being paid in product and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So you might want to see the transactions. So, okay, I think if that's your sense of things, we can resolve that one further, get a bank, have insurance, but it's really about liability and worker compensation insurance that we're really interested in that,
okay.
and tax compliance and whatnot. So, yeah. If you're comfortable with it, if you guys want to vote to approve what we've got for finalization, unless there are substantial questions that are unresolved, in which case we can come back for a meeting.
Is that all right? So you want us to vote then?
Um,
It's fine with me.
Put a bow on it in a nice way. You don't have to. I think, you could just give instructions to your lawyer to do stuff. Right?
When's our next regular meeting? About too late.
Until the
Oh, yeah,
16th.
that- All right, I don't mind us voting on this. Is there so, I mean, the vote would be to approve the rules.
Substantive changes in rules 1 through 4.
Do you want me to try?
Yeah, sure.
I move to approve the rules as drafted and give the general counsel authority to fix Scribner's rules and any other clarifying items in those drafts
As drafted and amended through,
and amended. So as drafted and amended at this meeting.
yeah.
Yes, and that makes sense to me. And the important instruction is go ahead and clean it up, but don't change.
That was the
substantive
second
policy
part, yes,
Without coming back
Yeah.
to us.
clarifying
Okay.
items.
And I mean, if we add in the caveat, if there is a substantive issue that we need to address,
Yeah, don't pull the trigger and we'll have another meeting.
yes, but does that obviate the need for this vote? If we have so many,
I think the important thing is that you will have told me clearly, whether by vote or not, that you want me to go ahead and file these things unless there's a problem.
all right, then if that's what we're doing, I like that amendment or that motion. Did you move or did you?
I did
just read?
move. I moved.
I will second.
All right,
I don't know what it is anymore.
I hope Patrick got all that.
all in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye. All right, okay. Thanks everyone for sticking with us. Thank you, Patrick. And I guess I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.